But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think this panel earlier hopefully has got us all fired up thinking about the systems change stuff. But as a local trust, obviously we've got to think about what is the best role we can play, how we can play into that bigger conversation, but also bring it to the local area so that it's relevant to the people that live and work here in Hampshire and on the island. And just lately thinking about our strategy and our kind of place-based approach, I'm very keen that we really look at developing these, really integrated work plans and these strategies. And I am going to start with the Isle of Wight. If you've had a flick through our strategy at the back, we've got just a few sentences about what we'd like to see happening in these different areas. And I've grown to just absolutely love the island over a number of years, and I can see this is a place where change can really happen. It feels like a place where there's momentum, where there's excitement, and as a biosphere reserve, it feels like a really important place where we can start to bring some of this together. So I'm going to start with just asking, I haven't done the thing where I'm asking you all to say why you're here. Do you need to do that first? I obviously haven't had enough coffee, I do apologise. Before we do that, I'm going to just ask you all to say a few words about you, why you're here, your role, just as we did with the other panel, and then we will get into the discussion. So I'm sorry about that. I've got far too excited about the Isle of Wight. So, Barnes, who are you and why are you here?
Hello, everyone. I can't see anyone. It's really scary up here. I've never been on a stage without a guitar, so this is sort of borderline terrifying. I am a mid-sized bipedal mammal human from the Isle of Wight. My day job is garlic farm, an organic farm that's B Corp certified, and I help with the steering group for the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And I founded a thing called Connected Wight, which it was built from a not-for-profit, and it's a website to celebrate and communicate what the Isle of Wight actually is and what it's doing, what it can do, and also help set up the Environmental Farmers Group cluster on the Isle of Wight, which is now a sort of a national thing, but we've got our own gang down there.
So I'm Theo Vickers. I'm a marine biologist and underwater photographer from the Isle of Wight, like Barnes here. I was born on the Isle of Wight, I grew up there, and I developed a really passionate interest at a young age in the Isle of Wight's marine environment, in our marine biosphere. I've been interested in all aspects of natural history throughout my life, but it's the marine environment that really fixated me, and it sort of remains today the sort of seas around the Isle of Wight, really. It hasn't really changed much. So I kind of really got into this, and the reason I'm here today is through my work kind of mainly as a photographer. So I began to kind of take images underwater when I was snorkeling as a teenager. I'm into my early 20s, kind of sharing that on sort of social media, getting a bit of a following kind of locally. And sort of since then, that's taken like an ever-expanding sort of role, ever-expanding email inbox as well, of doing kind of like rock pool safaris, public speaking, kind of creating community groups online to kind of facilitate marine conservation activities around the Isle of Wight. And I also have a role with the Trust as a community champion, so less in the marine context, but kind of looking at youth groups and kind of getting into the islands communities more again and getting that interest in nature going.
Thank you. Nick?
Well, thank you, Debbie. And I feel bad now because I'm not from the Isle of Wight, but I did marry someone from the Isle of Wight, so they let me in now and again. I joined the co-op about a year ago. I actually moved to Hampshire to join the co-op because that's such a big part of why I joined the company. It's just such a phenomenal place. I did start, however, as a food technologist, so I have spent my 25, 30 years of my career sourcing products both globally, nationally, and locally. And that is a big part of what the Southern Co-op do in terms of sourcing and working with local partners to deliver that. Many of you will be Southern Co-op members. We have 330,000 members, and so we are that membership-led, not-for-profit organisation that really delivers. And our ability to work with and support local charities and local work is part of the reason that we get involved with you so much. And the other area is we are very lucky. We've got 4,500 fantastic employees. And when we talk about place and local, It is those employees who work in our 500 different locations, be it a retail store, be it a Starbucks coffee shop, or be it a woodland burial ground in the area. They are actually involved in our stores, but also in those communities and feel part of it. And that's what the business is about.
Thank you. Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate Tuck, Councillor for Basingstoke Grey Ward. I have a role within the Borough for championing rivers and the natural environment. I am a lapsed diver. That was a long time ago. But I've always been keen on watery things. And about 15 years ago, a member of the Wildlife Trust came to our village to talk to us about the River Loddon chalk stream. And I couldn't believe we had this amazing river within our village, and literally I knew nothing very much about it, and certainly not just how precious chalk stream ecology is. So a huge thanks to Alison for that. So along the way, I've met some really, truly wonderful people who've been generous enough to share their knowledge with a distinct non-expert, and I thank all of them for their patience and support ever since. Thank you.
And Meg.
Hello, everybody. Oh, wow, I do talk loudly. Or they've turned the microphone volume up. Yeah, where to start, really? I mean, I am incredibly passionate about this local area, born and bred Southampton, but spent a lot of my teenage years on the Isle of Wight. So very much connected to this landscape, the chalk streams, just everything, the grasslands that we've got, the meadows, the new forest areas, going down to Lymington and the estuaries. I mean, we're so lucky to live here, and I really believe that. And my love for nature came from exploring these places. And for me, what started as a fundamental love of understanding what things are, what they're up to, where they're going, how they're doing it, basically just being a professional noser, just wanting to understand things, really then developed into this kind of fury to protect it. Because, of course, you know, we protect what we love, and I just love understanding animals. I'm curious about everything that they do. But, of course, that's no longer enough. So I ended up going from thinking about a career in academia. I did a lot of scientific research about predators. That's where I was going, to ending up in a career in science communication, which I'm so lucky and I love to do, because I love getting to talk to loads of people and get people to love things as much as I do. And I was very privileged a few years ago to be asked by the wonderful Debbie to become president of the Hampshire Wildlife Trust. And when that email came through, I was like, really? You want me? But it was a real honour, and it's been an absolute privilege to be part of the team. You know, for the last few years, seeing the work that they do in improving our wild landscape, and I think my role as president or ambassador, or you know, whatever kind of role that takes, and I work with a lot of NGOs these days, is to basically professionally pester them when I think we could be doing more. And I have to say, I have to pester Debbie the least. But yeah, I'm a science communicator ultimately.
Brilliant. And you can pester me, that's perfectly fine.
I will.
Yeah, we all need a bit of pushing, which is kind of what today is about, really. It's just pushing that envelope just a little bit more. Okay, so Barnes, let's start painting a picture of the island, how fantastic it is, but some of the problems there, and maybe some of the solutions that we've been talking about for the last kind of year or so, and how I'm determined to try and bring this conversation about place-based change to the full working partnership with all the incredible people on the island. But you say whatever you like. I'll let you loose.
It's potentially quite dangerous, Debbie, isn't it? I'm going to start at the end. I'm so excited. I've just got to say, this morning was just extraordinary. The kaleidoscope of insight and, yeah, the spectrum of topics and possibility got me completely hopping. So thank you already. Extraordinary. I'd kind of like to start at the end, if that can make any sense, which is that... Well, hang on. No, we'll do something weird. Everyone here, I can barely see, but if you can just raise your hand if you are involved in nature. I mean, I'm hoping that's going to be the whole room, you know, raising a hand. Okay, that's good. I can vaguely see that. And now, anyone involved in farming, if they could if they could raise their hand, there might be, yeah, there's definitely a few there. The next one is, if anyone eats food, could you raise your hand? Okay, so that's pretty much everyone raised their hand for the last one, which is good. So yeah, I sort of start there. I think from the huge and exciting map of change and restoration that was painted this morning, and is the living work of the Trust and everyone who contributes to it. I just want to try and make it very, very simple and really tangible and kind of everyone's job, not just the team or those who actively contribute or give money or whatever. Every living human, we all eat food, and food is the gateway to doing good or doing bad stuff. So I kind of want to begin with that. From the Isle of Wight, from what we're learning on the Isle of Wight, from what we're learning in our fields and in our friends' fields and collectively as a community, it's food. This probably sounds really odd, but we are nature, and nature is food, and where that balance is tipped, there's problems. But where that relationship exists, there's all the power. So, there's 1 million members. There's 69 million people in this country. We all eat food. Our choices over food will change the game at scale, fast. So that, if there's one thing that I say, it's that, I think. Linked to it is money. So I know these sound really basic, and it's just maybe I just have sort of simple brain from a weird background that actually wasn't in farming. But if we concentrate on where our food comes from and how it's produced, and if we also pay attention to where our money goes when we buy that food, in terms of how far it goes and how far up it goes and how far away it goes, and how that becomes just sort of consolidated in some very small handful of unhelpfully motivated conglomerates, that journey there is very different to it staying local and it actually doing things within a community. The local multiplier effect, the kind of the magic tenor. That's really powerful, and the change that can come as a result of us concentrating on buying food, in terms of what it can deliver for nature and communities, is massive. So yeah, I wanted to sort of launch with that. And thanks for waving your hands. I could see them mostly up to. So yeah, that's the sort of goal really from my perspective, and the handful of us on the Isle of Wight who are involved in this. It's trying to sort of bring it right to tangible brass tacks over what can get done, through what mechanism, at what scale, with what speed, in what way, and food and money is definitely a huge part of that. Our own sort of journey through to that can be expressed by local farmers we're close to. We've got two in the room. Maybe they were the two hands that went up. We're a group who are almost sort of putting more into nature than we are into food as farmers, and that imbalance is just a kind of a byproduct of the system, and that system can be changed through this sort of massive group effort. It's not just the Wildlife Trust, it's not just the Wildlife Trust working in partnership and in collaboration with the farmers, it's not just the local communities, it's not just individual pockets of the UK that then can show examples of how things can or can't be done. It's broad scale stuff, and it's possible. It's beginning to happen. So the idea there is sort of, I think, some of the bones among this Beacon project, which Debbie and I are working on with others, and the vision there is to take really kind of on-the-ground activity around the production of food, around land care, around those two things happening simultaneously, around water cycles, around carbon cycles, around biodiversity, protection, restoration, around productivity, around profitability, around these sort of transitions, that can happen, and can happen with group learning, and with that sort of really powerful collaboration and support. And then, physically do them, physically learn from them, physically take people with us as we go through there. And then a beacon just to sort of transmit that up. So to go, right, these 3 fields across those 2 farms have done this stuff, and this happened. And we shout about it. That sounds really overly basic, but that's one direction of the beacon idea, which it sort of is really at the minute. It's not a fully fledged thing. And the other idea is that it acts as a sort of receiving beacon. So we touched a little bit this morning, we heard a tiny bit this morning about natural capital, about alternate ways to kind of finance this transition. We heard about agri-environment schemes that have been borderline successful, but in some cases actively destructive. And then we've got this missing link of business as a force for good, and it very much can be, particularly when people understand what can be done there. And so the beacon is a sort of receiver, potentially, of these additional and alternate collaborators in a system change that needs to be massively faster than it is. And all that's happening on the Isle of Wight, which is quite small, and it's really exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Barnes. We use this funny little phrase that the island is kind of big enough yet small enough, or small enough and big enough. It's small enough where you can it's small enough that you can pretty much know most people and most land and kind of work together in a way that you can see, but big enough to be influential. And through the Biosphere Network, which is global, we'd like to be able to showcase a proper nature and community first economy that works for everyone. So the wealth is generated locally, there's money coming back to the island that's supporting jobs, it's creating futures for young people so they don't have to leave and go somewhere else because there's not enough work. And it's just that whole kind of circular piece, which I think, it's not quite there yet, but the vision is very strong and the support for it is incredible. So we'll keep working on it and we will make it happen. I'm going to come across to Kate. My list is in a random order, so just to bring a kind of place-based thing to life a little bit more. In Basingstoke and Deane, you talked a bit about the river and the chalk streams, and we've been working really closely with you. But again, it's kind of how do we bring that passion that you have into, strategic planning so that we're properly investing and recognising that River Loddon, that we're implementing, nature positive development, we're protecting that river. And just tell us a bit about the work you've been doing around river rights and about really championing in Basingstoke the value of the natural environment, because it's not very well designated, so you don't have the value, the benefit of the really strong protections like SSSIs and things. The Loddon is a Cinderella chalk stream, doesn't quite have that level of protection, so it needs champions like yourselves, hopefully with our support, to get it properly valued.
Oh, you're so right. It's so frustrating. In Basingstoke and Deane, we're so lucky to have the source springs of both the Test and the Loddon, and the difference between my 2 catchment partnerships is like, oh, please. So there's brilliant work goes on in both of those partnerships, of course. It was really interesting. I was Lorna Selby, who's been absolutely wonderful, my I trust friend, has been brilliant. And she called me and said, would you be interested in putting a motion forward on rights of rivers? And I'd just been hearing all about that on the radio. And I listened to this and I thought, oh my God, this is a bonkers idea. It's really insane. How can this possibly work? And the more that I kind of thought, do you know what? The current system, it just isn't working. We're all here. We all see this every day. There's some catastrophe on your local river. And I just thought, we need to look at this and see if there's anything in it. And she was brilliant. She's been the most wonderful sounding board and help, and has really helped fast track us through on this programme. So We had a public engagement scheme, a drop-in session, and that was reasonably well attended, but it raised lots of interest in the area. And I was very fortunate that in getting the motion passed, we had wonderful statements of support, both from the Wildlife Trust and from my 2 catchment partnerships, which was invaluable, because it's wonderful to be able to quote you as experts, and that includes our nature conservation groups, Natural Basingstoke and many others. And they are the experts in what's going on the ground, and so to have that support was wonderful, and that community engagement. Having passed the motion, we went, oh God, that was the easy bit. Now what happens? And I would love to have all the answers for you today, because it's a very interesting area, rights of rivers. But the honest truth is everybody's on a bit of a journey. It's an international sort of specification, I suppose you'd say. And I'm sorry, but we're a council, we have to be legally compliant within the UK law. And what I want is to sort of make sure that we have got that proper sound structure. So with Lorna, we've been working with Environmental Law Foundation, Hogan Lovells. And in fact, actually, I've got this quadges of paperwork, but they issued yesterday their Rights of Rivers practical guide, which has got some really useful information in. We were very much following where Lewes District Council had gone. They had their declaration passed in February, I think it was, this year. And so the first thing we did was speak to somebody who's already done it. But their objective was quite different. It was very much more to raise public awareness, and hats off, have they achieved that in spades. So we had a great conversation about do's and don'ts and hints and tips. But I want to achieve more. I want this to be something that works for our rivers, on the ground, and for the future. And this is where you touch on the planning policy. We're going through another local plan update, and Reg 18 for the second time. And each time we get a new version of the MPPF, and oh gosh, joy of joys, there's another one due out next month. So it is very much, you feel like you're in a spinny door. But the fact is, there is opportunity, even with our current legislation, within the local plan policies, to make or to incorporate things like the rights of rivers or elements of that, so that you have both in your spatial policies, so your site-specific policies. Sorry, I'm going to go very boring on this. So in your spatial site-specific policies, it's important to have stuff in there, and also in your non-spatial policies, so all the environmental ones, the pollution ones. And for a first time, we have got a rivers policy. So I'm really pleased with that, and to everybody who has helped us pull that together. Inevitably, it's always that you're kind of knocked back from the desired position. So even on something as simple as river buffers, where we had got, having attended the river buffers conference, and 50 to 100 metres is great, but practically speaking, let's go for 20. So I put 20 in, and then in Reg 18, we have the EA come back with, it's 10 metres. So, it is really quite hard work getting these things through and past all the consultees, the statutory consultees. So I come back to evidence also, and that's where the citizen science angle is unbelievably helpful. I'm very minded, I'm even going to quote our chief exec, who when I first started whittering on about rivers, one of the first things he said is, what you need, councillor, is evidence. And respect. So I do think anything that everybody's doing in terms of your citizen science work, that is just so valuable. And it needs to come to the fore, and we will make those cases and make sure that we are bringing rivers, back into where we would like them to be for the future. I've got to say, on the implementation side, apart from local plan policies, there are a number of strategy documents that your council will have, and we happen to be going through an update of our green infrastructure strategy, and if nothing else, it's going to be called the blue and green infrastructure strategy, but I hope a whole lot more. And again, the biodiversity document is going to be updated with more river-relevant work. So there's lots of work. It happens interminably slowly, I've got to say, and I just ask for your patience. I'd also say the big ask is, as residents, your voice is really important. And I think somebody said on the morning session, it was in relation to MPs, oh, they just want to hear from constituents. But actually, we really do. Your emails and support and constructive criticism is always welcome and is unbelievably valuable in focusing minds. So please keep doing it. What else do I need to say? It was policies and so on. Do you think I need to explain to people what the Charter is?
Well, there's perhaps the headline rights, because they are beautiful, and actually just to kind of come back to some of the lovely stuff Liz was saying earlier about that beautiful connection.
Okay.
You know, it's things like the right to flow. Sounds crazy, right? But that's one of them, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and I only grab a piece of paper for consistency, which is, you're quite right, the right to flow, the right to perform essential functions within its ecosystem, the right to be free from pollution, the right to feed and be fed by sustainable aquifers, the right to native biodiversity, the right to regeneration and restoration, and the right to active representation. And I've got to say, it's that last point I had my biggest hiccup over in terms of implementation. And that's because I don't want our work to be dependent upon, if we set up a group now where someone's going to be the voice of the river, what happens in 3 years' time when, you know, their work takes them somewhere else? You know, life happens, life moves on. I would like to find something that is sufficiently robust that no matter who is in the room and who is there, these things will be considered. So typically it's planning applications that cause the biggest problems, but not exclusively. But that's how it's seemingly working in my borough. And it's one of those things where I want whatever we have to go through to look at planning, we will have taken these factors into account.
Thank you, Kate. And it takes all different parts of society to push for the change, so this is a really important part of it. So thank you for what you're doing, it's brilliant. And I have to say, we've also got more Rights of the Rivers movements in, I think, Winchester, East Hants, Southampton, where else? Test Valley, maybe? Yes. Yeah, so it's spreading. And, you know, the more this spreads, the more we will put it through and test it legally and in policy. It'd be really interesting to see.
Oh, you've reminded me. That's a really important point. So on our journey, we thought initially we would want a bespoke Rights for Rivers, looking at our particular circumstances. And what we've done is we've consulted with different people, is decide that actually what we want is a quite a standard version. And with Wildlife Trust and Environmental Law Foundation and Hogan Lovells, they've come up with a standard version, and we're hoping that might be something that everybody in the UK, that would be UK compliant version, that everybody would be able to use really easily and straightforwardly, and then we won't be the weird ones that went off piste.
We need a few weird ones in life though, Kate. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on, but that's brilliant, and we'll continue to work with you and push for river rights everywhere, which I think would be amazing. And then, you know, rights for all other nature too. Even the little weird things that we love so much, Meg. Little weird things that we love so much.
What's the weird things that we love? I mean, I love all weird things.
All little weird things.
Yeah, I'm all for the weird.
Rights of all nature is kind of like, it feels like what we were talking about earlier about properly valuing nature. You know, I think there's a really interesting, I know in Southampton they had a really interesting meeting of the council where they had nature represented at their council meeting. So these ideas may seem wacky at the moment, but I feel like there's momentum coming.
They've just got to remove the signs from the bins that say don't feed the birds.
Yes, indeed. So Meg, do you want to, as you've got the mic, let's have a chat about rolling up our sleeves as citizens. So my question to you, and you can say whatever you like really, it's perfectly fine. But so we want to roll up our sleeves, we want to be community activists, we want to be active citizens in shaping our future, using our voice more. I love the fact that you prod and push NGOs, and please continue to do that. You know, we all need to speak louder, but how can we really, you know, what do you think is that role of campaigning, and how can we encourage people to be that little bit braver? Because I know it can be hard, and if you feel like you're the only one, it can be quite difficult. So What else do we need to do to use our voice better?
I think when you start campaigning, you realise that you're not the only one, but it's taking that first step, which can be the first nerve-wracking bit of really being comfortable and using your voice and standing up in potentially uncomfortable situations. I know Barnes earlier asked you to raise your hand if you were working in the nature sector, and I think pretty much everybody did. But I'm going to ask you to raise your hand now, and just, if you identify as an activist, lift up your hand. Oh, one straight at the back there. Pretty good. I'd say maybe like 45, 50% of you. Maybe that's... There was one right at the back, just flung up. I mean, yeah, I'd hold my hand up in the air as well. It's a funny word, isn't it? I was on a panel yesterday, a bit like this one, but very different to this one. And I mentioned the A word. And I won't talk about the organisation that I was doing the panel for, although I'm sure you could figure it out, but I won't say personally now. And the director of that organisation, the moment I said activist, put his head in his hands. And I was like, oh, that's going to get me going. You're going to regret doing that. He did get an earful afterwards. I think the word activist is a really interesting one. And when I was younger and learning about activism, I learned about Martin Luther King. I learned about the suffragette movement. I learned about Emily, who was one of the founders of the RSPB, but had to do it under her husband's name because women weren't allowed at that time to run organisations. Although she did vote in against for women having the vote, but that's another thing. That's a product of the time. But all of these pioneers that stood up and did something different for what they believed in, they saw an injustice and they couldn't let that sit on their shoulder. And I think there's real power in that. And I remember looking up to these people in my history lessons, learning all about them, what they were like, why they did what they did, and how they did it. I'm just thinking, God, look at where we are now. I mean, of course, with those issues, women's rights, civil rights movement, all of that kind of stuff, we've still got a long way to go, but we have come quite a far way in a short period of time. Again, not diminishing the fact that there is a lot of work that needs to be done there. But these are absolute icons that we celebrate in our history lessons, we celebrate in documentaries, we just admire them for doing something brave and bold. And yet when it comes to environmental campaigning and environmental activism, the way that it is communicated is really quite damaging. Because if you look at the press, you see, the protests, you see campaigns, sometimes the word activist is kind of smeared. And I think as Boris Johnson once called the protest that I was a part of, he called everyone on it hemp-wearing buffoons. I've never worn hemp in my life.
Tofu-eating wokerati. Do you remember that one?
Tofu-eating wokerati.
Remember that one?
Right. Well, if being woke means being caring, then I'm all for it, quite frankly. And I think we have to reclaim what the word activism means. And I say this quite a lot in my talks to people, because it doesn't mean you have to go to the streets of London and glue yourself onto something. That is a form of activism, and if you can do that, I'm never going to discourage people from wanting to do that method, because you have to have extreme types of activism, or extreme types of activism, obviously all peaceful as much as possible, completely peaceful, completely legal as much as possible, unless you're, that's the what you're wanting to achieve is to break the law and push the law. You don't have to do that, but you have to have those extremes in order for there to be space in the middle. And the further those people are willing to push the boundaries of activism, creates more space for people like me, people like the NGOs, to move around in the centre. If we all stayed within our comfort zone, we wouldn't be able to do very much. But we need to have those, brave people that are willing to go that little bit further, because it gives us space to campaign more. And it gives all of us, the confidence to do more, which is really exciting. You don't have to go and join those protests, although for legal, and they're always peaceful, despite what the media say. I always recommend joining them, because I always say that you'll never find a group of people that are more connected than you will, on a like Restore Nature Now march. I call them festivals of purpose, because people come together, there's good music, there's food, there's really interesting conversations, often professors and scientists and teachers and the intelligent people that have come together because they don't know what else to do. They've signed the petitions, they've put in the hedgehog highways, they've hung the bird feeders, and nothing's changed. So we're driven to do this because of the inaction and the slowness of the corrections that are happening. And there is some good work, but it is incredibly slow moving. So you're driven to do that. Now, activism can mean what you want it to mean to you. It doesn't mean you have to go protest, although I'm a big fan of that. It means, you know, if you do something different tomorrow that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, that can be your way of being an activist. You are an active being in your environment. Every day you're making an impact on that environment by what you're choosing to eat, where you spend your money, where you're travelling, how you're travelling. And you're having that impact, you may as well make it a more positive one tomorrow by making slight changes. And I'm against this idea of kind of putting it on the individual person where we are now, because we know the amount of damage that is done comparably to the individual person by millionaires and corporations that have completely stripped the earth bare. You know, that's where the onus should be on. It shouldn't be on us to maybe get the bus once in a while. It's maybe on kind of actually taxing appropriately and maybe not drilling fossil fuels out of the earth. It is not drill, baby, drill. Where was I? I'm in the middle of my rant. Bear with me. So we really need to do individual actions. Yes, we can make those differences in our own lives, and of course we should. A lot of those decisions make us healthier as well. But the real power, the best tool that we've all got as individuals is our voice. So when people ask me, and I get asked every single year, what's the best thing you can do to help wildlife? Well, I'm going to be completely honest. If I have to say put in a hedgehog highway one more time, honestly, I might lose my mind. Is important. Please do put in a hedgehog highway. But please also use your voice. Stand up. Be bolder tomorrow than you were today. It might be a bit daunting to begin with, but I promise once you do, you will find your community, and you will actually find that you're not alone in these stresses. And I think sometimes we get really quiet because we don't feel like our neighbour feels the same way that we do. But actually, when we're bold enough to use our voice, we find that they are. And that's when that eco-anxiety, that weight on your shoulders actually lessens, because you find the people that care just as much as you do and are willing to fight by your side. And we do have a fight on our hands here. You know, there is no getting away from that. We've lost over 70% of the world's biodiversity. We live in one of the most nature-depleted countries anywhere in the world. Yes, we've got gems, we've got some incredible habitats and some amazing work that has to be done, but our political system at the moment is really on edge. We don't know how things are going to go. The infrastructure bill that's coming up, planning an infrastructure bill, is really terrifying. And, there's a certain few politicians that aren't in power at the moment that might get into power that, I will be honest, completely terrify me. And for anyone working in nature and conservation, they should terrify you too. And this is why we have to fight now. This is why we have to fight braver and fight bolder. And this is why I will continue pestering everybody to recognise themselves as activists and to stand up and do that little bit more. And that includes charities, organisations, that includes individuals, that includes government, and so on and so forth. There's nobody I won't pester. And neither should you, so start pestering with me, please. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some really good stuff there about what it means to be an activist. And you're right, it takes all sorts of different people to do different things. And what I love is that you just take one step. So if you're here and your step is just there, that's fine because you're stepping. And I'm going to hand over to Nick now because, working in business, in the co-op, you're in quite a different place to somebody like Meg and maybe myself, but actually, there's activism there in terms of what you're doing as a business. You can make a difference. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about the role that you play and the role that you see your business and your partnership with the Trust in helping to do something for nature and the environment?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very different position to be in.
It is, yeah, but it all has a role to play.
It does have a role to play, and we are a purpose-led business. In fact, we're not even a business, we're a co-op, and that really does change things. And the unique thing about who we are is every decision we make goes through a very specific and tailored compass. And we do call it a compass internally that says, is the decision right for our members who own us? Is it right for our customers who shop with us? Is it right for our local communities? And is it right for the climate and the nature that we work in? Or is it right commercially? And that's the final conversation. That's not the first conversation. And that's a fundamental difference to how we approach what we do and what we have to do. Now, how do we get there? We start off at the top. Yes, we have to align ourselves with things like UN development goals and climate goals and things like that. But we try and bring it back down at each stage to get to our local area. And that can be from working with yourselves, working with other societies, right the way through to last week we built a Starbucks randomly, and I hate to say with all the abuse of bat boxes today that we were quite pleased to build it with the correct bricks and the bat boxes and the insect hotels, and gaining BREEAM and water diversity for a building of a Starbucks in this community. But that's what we do, because every part of what we're trying to achieve, we're trying to tick those boxes in the local area. We've also got to hire those local staff who are acting in our areas, and they're part of who we are. You flip that right round, and we were talking earlier, and we're not just about supplying your milk, your bread and things like that. We are a circular economy. We are literally wholly dependent on nature for what we do. We need food. We have 2,500 local products in our stores, and I've tried most of them. Many from the Isle of Wight. We talk a lot about food. I shouldn't forget the gins and the wines. But it's a massive part of what we do, and those local suppliers who work with us and constantly make us better helps, because we cannot as a business constantly drive it all ourselves, and we need those partnerships, and you shouldn't underestimate that. We also need that help to be led, and some of the conversations that we've had, Debbie, recently about how could we make long-term commitments and focus our investment, our members' investment, because it's not the co-ops, it's our customers and our members who shop with us. How do we use that in the long term to really, really make a difference? And I think that's what will make the change, and that's what we can do. And you talk about having nature on the board. Well, that is absolutely part of what we do, that we have a member-led board, and they are not quite as aggressive as you might talk about, but in terms of every decision has to have that local benefit to the community, that local benefit to nature. And that's a fantastic part of what a business can do, because if you're not doing that, then really you're failing your community. And we talk about how close the stores are and our staff are. Well, I'm literally sat here, and as I walked in today, we talk about our neighbours. My neighbour is literally in the room today. That's how close we are with our community, and it makes a real difference.
Well, thank you, Nick. And we're working very closely with Co-op to invest some of your members' contributions into the local environment. So we'll continue to do that and do as much as we can to improve things locally. Okay, Theo, talk to me about. So Theo, you are an incredible underwater photographer, as you've said, huge advocate for the island and for the marine environment. And your role as an engagement champion, I've heard such fantastic stories about how you just really bring the wonders of nature to life and how you just really enthuse people and hopefully turn them into nature champions and activists. So tell us a bit more about how you do that and your hopes for taking that forward and doing even more of it.
Yeah, so I think it's fundamentally about tangible physical experiences with nature. That's what I think. I came into this and I started doing the photography side. Certainly, it's very heavily sort of social media focused. And the talks I do, displaying images, and did that for quite a few years. And there's always a great reception. People are going, I can't believe this is off the coast of the Isle of Wight. It's really, really cool. But I think actually it comes down to a point where that only really goes so far. In that you look at a picture on Instagram, you go to a talk and there's a picture of a cuttlefish, but you're not actually there. You're not really seeing the cuttlefish. It's still of limited relevance to your life, I think. There was a statistic at the start, I think you mentioned, that 6% of people don't really engage with nature or in any meaningful way as part of their life. And I think certainly if we extrapolate that into my marine context, that's probably much higher percentage, maybe 100% into the high 90s. People don't engage with cuttlefish and thornback rays every day. If you do, that's great. I'm jealous of you. But it's just not something that happens. And so kind of that's sort of the pivot that led me certainly into more kind of physical events, the physical experiences. So the rockpool safaris that kind of we started running in the last year or so, that's kind of got that aim. It's about getting islanders, it's aimed at islanders, getting people out onto the coastline and having these physical experiences with animals and the environments that we're actually kind of dealing with. Because I think if you take it beyond me, if you're saying we need to conserve seagrass, we need to conserve kelp forests, we can show them all the images we like. You can talk about its virtues all you like, but unless people are really experiencing it, it's going to be really challenging to actually make that meaningful change. And obviously a caveat of that is that experiences with nature mean different things, different people, people's needs, requirements, that kind of thing. But I think there's always a way to connect. So, an example with the safaris, we've had kind of people come onto one, they've come onto another one, they've come onto another one, and slowly they start to talk about, I might, do some seagrass volunteering actually, maybe I'll do this, because you can kind of see they've gone down the pipeline of, it was an interesting thing to do on a Friday night, with your kids, and now it's kind of becoming something more, and you're kind of building this connection to an environment, certainly. So that's kind of the kind of ethos I've gone along now is getting people experiencing nature and making it relevant in their lives, and I think you can extrapolate that to the terrestrial environment as well. Even though we talk about the Isle of Wight, there are some really deprived communities on the Isle of Wight. That's a really big thing to kind of recognise, who even though they might live in a place that the national perception might be it's really beautiful, there's lots of nature there, they might not actually be accessing the island's environment all the time. You often hear stories of, families from areas of Newport, for example, that are quite deprived, who maybe they don't go to the beach at all. You think you live maybe 5 or 8 miles from it. And so it's bringing it into their lives. So yeah, I'm a massive champion of the physical experience, yeah.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Everyone remembers their first, worm they picked up, or the first time you touched something like a flower or whatever it was, and it's a living thing, you can feel it. So, amazing the work you do. It's absolutely fantastic. I've never seen a cuttlefish, so I'm going to have to come out with you and go diving or snorkeling. So I'm going to come and do that. I'm going to open up to the audience for questions. What I'm trying to do here is just really kind of expose the amazing different ways in which the Trust works with different partners. We do everything from working with businesses to engagement, working with farmers, working with councils, campaigning. We actually do all of that within the Trust, and I feel like, the work we do, we're quite eclectic, but we're very much around place, changing places, taking action locally, and then I'm just super keen to then use that to influence out and up and really show people that wherever you are in life, you can make a difference, whether it's the food you eat, where you bank, whatever. So, I'm hoping that we can kind of explore some of these more local themes by opening up now to the audience. So can we have the lights?
Excellent discussion. Kate, this is directed at you in terms of the local councillor level. It's in terms of decision making that happens at local council, often it's human recreation centric. I think that's probably fair to say. How much of a change have you seen in terms of the understanding and knowledge amongst your fellow councillors, irrelevant of the colour of their rosette, in terms of their understanding between the different types of habitat? They seem to be very fixated on parks and recreation, but there are truly natural spaces as well. How familiar do you think they are in understanding the difference?
So this has been a bit of a thing. Our biodiversity officer did put on some training on biodiversity for members. It was incredibly poorly attended. I've got to say it was not very well attended. I think it is a real challenge, and especially not only to answer your point, it's kind of there is a gap in knowledge. I don't have loads of knowledge. I am in no way a specialist. I've just learned bits and pieces from different people, so I don't pretend to be that. And we rely on our officers to summarise things in various, whether it's a planning application or indeed in the strategy. So yes, we do rely, perhaps I shouldn't speak for everybody, I rely on my residents who do amongst them have great wealth and great expertise. And then if I can ask the right questions of officers, then I hope we end up in a better place for that strategy or that planning application.
Thank you. It does, again, come down to language storytelling and linking it back to health and all these other things, yeah.
But to take your question further up the food chain, I have a problem also with planning inspectors. And what I am now doing, and if everybody here does this too, this would be brilliant. I am now, the CABA, catchment-based approach, chalk stream restoration, has some brilliant PDFs on, ecology of chalk streams, headwater, blah, blah, blah. There are about 4 or 5 of them, and I attach those to every single planning application I submit an objection to where a river is involved. On the basis the planning inspector must at least read all the evidence put before them. And I kind of can do that with officers too. So if everybody does some of that, that would be a great help on the education story.
Great, thank you, Kate, excellent. Okay, questions. Gentleman at the front, I saw you first, and then I've got some more behind.
Hello, Bob Barnes. I'm a retired consulting engineer, but I'd be very interested to 2 or 3 of you to discuss what I would think is controversial problem between food production, renewable energy with solar panels on agricultural land, planning and housing.
Okay, do you want to start, Barnes?
Hot potato.
Hot potato, indeed.
What about if some of these things could happen at the same time? I think is the short response to that question. There's a mosaic of solutions that need to exist to get us out of this issue, and the either or it seems unhelpful. The nuance, the compromise, the overlap, the untested, experiment that could be done to let 2 things or 3 things coexist, I think is where we need to be looking. And there is some evidence of that. We have some limited experience of it. But yeah, I think that's a great question because it represents a real challenge. And behind it is significant commercial pressure. And without wanting to sort of blow back into the really exciting panel this morning, money really charts what goes on. So I think paying attention to the money in those sort of seemingly conflicted or conflicting situations over land use is the key. But, if we can look to do 2 things together, nature with food production, with more sensitive energy, why can't we do that?
Yes.
Yeah, good answer.
If I can just add to that, I've been concerned by planning permissions given in Hampshire for solar farms on agricultural land. There's a huge one on the Alresford bypass, if you remember, for example. And I think there's a need for action by councils to consider this carefully. My background is I grew up during World War II in Croydon. I know what food rationing is, and I know what we did and had to do at home. And if you follow Professor Tim Holt, who's Professor of Food Technology in Garden Organic, and he's been writing about this in the magazine for the last year or 2, quite considerably. Threats of war, threats of food production. We import about half our food at the moment. And we are supposedly told by the government that we're in threat of war with Russia in the next 2 or 3 years. I think we've got to look ahead and think seriously.
Thank you. Point well made. Any more comments? It's a point well made. Thank you very much. Let's move on because we've only got about 10, 15 minutes left. Who's got the mics? You happy to run all the way up to the back because we've got right at the back and then there, and then I'll come back to this side. It's easy to neglect the people at the back because they're harder to see.
That'd be which one?
Yeah, and the young guy there as well with the dark blue.
Okay, I'd just like to ask the panel, and I'm not sure anybody in particular, but maybe Theo would be the best person. The Solent is a piece of enclosed sea. It's right at the middle of the Wildlife Trust, Hampshire and Isle of Wight territory. And yet, it seems to be somewhat neglected by environmental groups. I say this because I'm on the Environment Agency's task group, which is looking at the whole business of trying to mitigate for marsh loss and pulling back the coast, what's called managed realignment. And I live in a community right on the edge of the water where I find myself, I'm a soil scientist by training and a biochemist, but I did a lot of ecology in my day. I was also an educator. I find myself spending a lot of time talking to people about why these marshes matter and why the intertidal marshes matter. And they're, of course, the ones that are threatened by sea level rise. So I just feel that it would be, at some point, Hampshire Wildlife Trust should be making a bit more noise. I know you've got some projects. I've spoken to the people in the marketplace who are doing some work, but it seems quite minimal compared to a lot of the other things you're involved with. And I'd like to say that the sailing community is one of the communities I interact with a lot, and the fishing community is one of the communities I interact a lot with. And the lack of understanding about what's going on in the Solent and why it's important is a concern, I think, something that needs to be addressed by this group.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree at all, fully agree. I haven't got a huge amount of time, but what I would say is, look, if you think about the coast, it's nearly all developed. We've got very little space, a little bit on the New Forest coast, but some of that's under threat, as we know. There's very little space, isn't there? And we are trying, we have been doing for some time, we do a lot of work with local planning authorities. The last few bits of coast that are not developed, and there aren't many of them left actually, particularly on the sort of eastern side of Hampshire, that land needs to be brought forward for coastal realignment, wetland creation. We've done 90 hectares in the Lower Test at Manor House Farm, which was mentioned earlier. That was funded to compensate for losses elsewhere. We're also looking at things like beneficial use of dredging, seeing if we can recharge salt marshes where they're being eroded. But it is a massive challenge, and of course we've got the threat of more port development at Dibden Bay that we talked about earlier. The Solent is the busiest, isn't it? The busiest kind of stretch of water in terms of shipping. It's a huge, huge challenge, but we are trying to do more in that coastal space. I think we're right at the forefront, aren't we, of climate change, pollution issues. The nutrient neutrality work that we do is trying to address some of the pollution issues as well on the coast. So we're probably maybe doing a bit more than is visible, but we're certainly trying to do more. But I agree with you, it's a huge challenge. And we're right at that forefront, aren't we, of climate impacts, pollution, loads and loads of development, and more to come. So, you know, we all need to kind of get together on trying to at least push back some of this development that's coming, because, we're running out of space along the coast. But thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything? Or no? Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
And thank you very much for today and for lunch. I'm not knowledgeable in any sense, so this might be quite an open question. But I was quite curious about the communication issues that was talked about quite a lot this morning, but specifically wanted to ask about that with young people and children. And I think bioempathy was sort of mentioned, was quite a nice term, and opportunities for creating that. So I wanted to ask, sort of from the experience of the panel, what the walls or the barriers are to those opportunities, if that's the right image, and maybe what some of the back doors into that could be. Is it through schools? Is it to do with targeted groups, or are those approaches too limited? That was my question, really.
Okay, thank you.
I think, I mentioned this morning, and I think it goes beyond just young people. We live in a time where every generation is experiencing nature disconnection. I was with a scientist yesterday that studies this, And we were just talking, just in general about how much time people have to connect with nature and how much of a privilege it is for those that do have that relationship. Like everyone to be sat in this room now to have an experience with nature that brings you here. We are so, so very lucky. And when we talk about climate change and biodiversity loss, obviously those two things are very much interlinked, but what we now need to interlink with that group is how socioeconomics also interlinks and humanitarian issues come into play. And we know that a lot of people don't have the time to be connected with nature. They don't have the time to sit and listen to the birds. They don't have the time to pick up earthworms or look under logs like we all still probably do. We're able to harness that childlike curiosity that we're all innately born with. I personally believe that every single human is born with that innate curiosity. And it's how it's harnessed as we go through life that's really important. And it's a privilege to have that still harnessed with us today. But with modern pressures, cost of living, jobs and everything, people have lost that. And therefore, when they have children, they don't have the time to harness that curiosity or to allow them to harness that curiosity because they don't even have time for themselves. So I think it's a wider issue, not just young people being disconnected. I would say it's a whole societal problem. But I would also say that whilst on one side of the coin, yes, we have got that issue where there is a lack of communication. It's not necessarily a lack of interest, I don't think, because I go to schools quite a lot of time and I bring my box of goodies. And, I get them to pick up, an object, and they look at me, what is it? And I go, that's a hyena poo. And they go, what? And I'm like, yeah, sorry. Didn't tell you before you picked it up, but, got you interested. And you show them a badger skull or you show them a feather and, you get them to tear apart the feather a little bit and put it back together again. And you see the magic in their eyes. Yesterday I was talking about an acorn. It's a mast year this year. I mean, acorns are everywhere. You're falling over them. My coat pockets, every coat I think is filled with acorns because I can't help but pick them up. But the magic in that tiny little thing and how we communicate that is really vital. So whilst, yes, we do have this nature disconnection because we don't have the time or the headspace to really connect with it, which is something we've got to focus on, we also have a generation which is probably one of the most empowered young generations we've ever had. Fridays for Future movement, Greta Thunberg has, spearheaded that. We've got young people that really care. They're about to inherit a planet which is struggling, which is unwell, which has potential. Of course it does. It's why we're all sat here, is because we've got hope that we can do better by it. But these young people want to know what's going on with their planet. They don't want things to be sugar-coated. They don't need to be told, oh, look at this, feeding the birds is going to save everything, isn't it lovely? They don't need to be told that. We have to confront climate change and talk to young people about it. It's their future, after all. And be kind of honest, but whilst ringing that alarm bell, help them find the solutions or give them the solutions if we've got them. But I think it's about providing space and time for people to reconnect, telling them how to reconnect, as well as kind of just supporting young people and not just, dare I say it, as a tick box exercise, as we see a lot of youth panels are these days. We've got a youth panel, isn't it great? We listen to them, okay? Good, you listen to them. Do you act on them? Do you actually act and put into play what they want for their future? The majority will say no, or they won't know what to say. So acting on young voices is really crucial as well to give them, agency over their future. But yeah, it's a lot I could answer in many different realms at that question in terms of communication issue and nature connectedness. But there's hope there. But we've just got to just get all age groups, I think, just to stop and listen to a blackbird sing.
Thank you, Meg.
I think I'd also like to say, I think that's the importance of having nature on your doorstep. So wherever you happen to be, we're not all going to drive to the nearest national landscape for our recreation. It's what you see every day when you're walking to work or driving to work or picking the children up, whatever it happens to be. I think it's really important there's access to natural green space. And I think that's also how... I've got a mission on to try and change some of our municipal planting, as I would describe it. We're still doing some Victorian bedding, and it's surely we can do better than this. And I think it's that connection with, that's what it looks like. I'm going to hold back from rewilding, but I think there's a balance.
You can call
to be
it
had
whatever
somewhere.
you want to call it. Thank you. Right, we've got time for a couple more. So you've had your hand up very enthusiastically there. Let's go here. Both of you. Do you have a shared question? Go on, do two, and then there's more over there.
Devolution, friend or foe?
Okay. I'll talk about that, and you can too. Go on.
I wanted to tell you a story, very briefly. As Debbie said, I'm a rewilder, and we had a rewilding reunion a couple of weeks ago down at Embercombe, and there are 50 of us. And I had to lead a talk on winning hearts and minds. So much as Megan says, but we use the word ambassador rather than activist. And the first thing that someone perked up with was, well, there's 50 of us here. If we each convert 2 people to be ambassadors every year for 10 years, there will be 10 million of us. I said, well, that's not enough.
That's the start.
We came up with 2 conclusions. The first one was you must stand up and be counted. So whenever you hear something wrong, when you see it wrong on social media, wherever, put it right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll make mistakes, but you learn most by your mistakes. So it's great to make mistakes. And so talk to people in bus queues, in the supermarket, wherever you are, be the ambassador that you can be. And the second one, I'm hoping I'm going to remember this. Oh, God, my brain's gone. Was the story. Yes. Has anyone ever read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That wrecked it for beavers. They eat fish. Fishermen don't like them.
Yes.
And has anyone read Red Riding Hood? Wolf eats people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Wrecked it for wolves, but there's over 20,000 wolves in Europe. They don't eat anyone. So it's all wrong. They're lies.
Myth-busting.
The thing that we really wanted to do in our group, because we came up with 2 action plans, one was to tell everyone, this one was to find a storyteller, such as Tolkien or the person who wrote Peppa Pig or Chicken Run or something like that, to change the reputation of 4 or 5 keystone species: beavers, lynx, wild boar, wolves. And I don't know whether any of you know the best storyteller in the whole world, but if you could put them in contact with me, we can persuade them to change it.
Okay, brilliant. Love that. Thank you, Stephen. Excellent.
Can I, very quickly, what you're talking about there is activism. So I'm always a big fan of it. I think it's brilliant. The work you're doing is absolutely incredible, and we need to really challenge the reputations of these animals. I mean, like Red Riding Hood, all of those stories really fundamentally play a part. And, Steven Spielberg, thanks for the reputation of sharks. I mean, come on. But what you're talking about is activism. So let's reclaim that word, not let people drag that down, because it's been something that's been celebrated historically, and it should be celebrated today. So don't be fearful of it. It's great. You're an activist. It's all good.
No
Fantastic. Fear. Okay. I am going to answer your question, Charlotte, but I'm going to just take one more, and because we have 5 minutes, so let's do one more. I saw some hands over there, did I? Oh, here, sorry. And then we will talk about devolution, because we do want to cover that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bo Priestley. I'm from Winchester, which is a city blessed with many wonderful environments. There are nonetheless spaces that are kind of neglected spaces, forgotten spaces. They're ripe for development, and that's always what happens, and there's the pressure on it. I want to come back to devolution, friend or foe, and say, how can we empower local people to act, to put pressure on improvement of local spaces? That's what I'd understand by local place-based delivery. How can we make that happen? And will devolution, I think one of the problems is how to find your way into your council and get some action. So will devolution help with that? I think the planning regs are not helping us at the moment.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about devolution. Are there any more questions? Because it's your last chance before the break. No. Okay, well, Oh, there is one. Let's take one more, and then we will finish on the lovely topic of devolution, because I have got some specific things to say about that.
Hi, my name is Anne Conquest. I work for Land Use Consultants, LUC. Thank you, Debbie, for taking me from angry woman this morning to brave and bold this afternoon. My question is about Brave and Bold, and it's to Barnes. I wonder if I'm involved with agriculture and trying to get farmers to work together more to try and aggregate their ecosystem services and rely less potentially on grants, agri-environment schemes. Can you tell me whether bringing farmers together on the Isle of Wight has made them more brave and bold?
Yeah, good question, and categorically yes. Just in a massive sense. I'm a really new farmer. I did something very, very different for a long time, and there's no way I would have made any progress without the immediately local support, collaboration, fascination. So huge, but also nationally, there's some very impassioned change makers in land care, farming, and really radical stuff going on. So earlier today, I texted a group of 362 sort of activists, ambassadors, farmers, call them what you want, nature enthusiasts. They're all human, they all eat food. And I've had a torrent of messages come back. So this is a group that continues to support me on a farming journey, is teaching me, every day about how to balance nature restoration with food production, how that benefits individuals, communities, and how that is eminently scalable, how that delivers health in every single measure. It's a complete wonder. So it's happening locally, it's happening nationally, and I just want to use that as an excuse really to kind of mobilise the Wildlife Trust. This is the best placed organisation to accelerate the delivery of positive outcomes. So can we, pledge today to take nature restoration into the fields, to go with the farmers and to collaborate in this way that's going to speed up and deepen, the possibility of transformation that's going to be economic and ecological. It's doable. So yeah, good question.
Yes.
Thank you.
I say yes. From me, I say yes. Let's do this. Okay, right. We're going to go to the break in a minute, but on devolution, it is happening. So there's a few things to say on that. Kate may want to come in. First of all, at a national level, we have a devolution white paper. We are working with our colleagues across the Wildlife Trust nationally to make sure that within that devolution white paper, there is a duty on the new devolved authorities to further nature restoration and climate action. At the moment, that's not in there. Is that right, Hannah? It's just not in there at all. So, we will have devolved authorities. We'll have a mayor. We'll have strategic combined authority, and we'll have some unitary authorities. Hampshire and the Isle of Wight at the moment has, 14 or 15 districts and unitaries, and we'll end up with 4. So a massive, massive, massive change. But we will have an elected mayor. We're going to be running some hustings over the next few months, working very much with the Climate and Nature Network and other partners. And as citizens, as voters, let's put pressure on those mayoral candidates to really stand up for nature and climate and neglected green spaces and green infrastructure and all of that stuff. Now's the time. The mayor elections are in May next year. This thing is happening, whether you like it or not. Let's get good representation, the right people in those jobs. And if any of you want to become a councillor like Kate, if you've got the time, I say let's flood all our councils with really great people that care and take action that way. If you can't do that, come to the hustings, really get that conversation going, and let's make these mayors work for their jobs, work for that position, and have a really positive climate and nature story. Because, now is a really great opportunity to do that. So keep in touch with us. We'll be running some events, I think, some hustings and things like that. We'll be mailing out stuff as well. Maybe questions you can ask your mayoral candidates and get involved that way, because we can influence this. If we get an amazing person in that role who's championing local green spaces, climate action, local food, circular economy, green jobs, we could really transform this place. So it's a massive, massive opportunity. So I think we need to grasp that. Do you want to say anything else?
Well, just to say, I think the choice of mayor is going to be incredibly important. And I find it frustrating because it's described as devolution, but of course, actually, it's sucking up power from the district and borough authorities. So where planning decisions and strategic decisions like that were made locally, they will be made by a mayor who cannot possibly know or understand the intricacies of your local area. And I think that's a real concern. In amongst that, we've also got local government reorganisation. So it is an extra special time. I have raised this natural environment stuff with the Chief Exec because our briefing, which was very comprehensive, but obviously the big focus is on healthcare and the provisions thereof and basically working out new ways of certainly doing better, considerably better with the limited budget. So there was a kind of look of natural environment. So I do think it would be very timely, both for the Wildlife Trust and for everybody here, to raise that subject with their individual authorities.
Great. Excellent. Okay, so lots to do. I think the message here today is we're all activists. Let's take action wherever we are, wherever we live, wherever we are, wherever we feel comfortable. Take one step out of your comfort zone and do something different and new. This is our tribe. We can all make a huge difference wherever we live. And we all care. I mean, look, if all of you take a leaf out of Stephen's book, you go and convert 2 or 3 other people, you know, that is a movement. We can build that movement together. So I say thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry if we didn't answer all of your questions, but you know where we are. Stay in touch, be part of the change. And with our new strategy, we'll come and see you all and we'll develop some of these plans in even more detail. But I need a cup of tea, so let's have a break. I'll see you later.